If you're looking to get jacked naturally, to be honest, it's easier than you think. And today I'm going to break down how I've helped hundreds of people get jacked naturally, give you insights into the training philosophies, a free sample program, and the pathway to become your most truly jacked self. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe and let's get into it. So first of all, this presentation, I titled it It's Easier Than You Think, because the number one mistake that people make with trying to get jacked naturally is they go too hard. They try to push everything as hard as they possibly can, because what they're actually doing is mirroring people who are on steroids or using programs that just do not suit the natural athletes. Okay. And so I'm going to cover a heap of the principles of that today, and then I'm going to show you guys something very cool. So, who am I for a start? My name's Coach Dillon. I have been a coach now for over 12 years. I've represented my country in weightlifting, been a CrossFit coach, been a head strength and conditioning coach at a really nice boutique gym. I've owned two gyms myself. I've coached multiple world records in different sports. Heaps of professional athletes in AFL, rugby, rowing, fighting, all sorts of stuff. Couple of my recent clients. This is my client Jesse. He just set a world record in handstand push-ups. Absolutely beast of a natural athlete. As you can see, super jacked. And this is one of my clients, a rugby player named Felicity. Once again, another natural athlete who's absolute monster. She's a beast and super jacked as well. So just a little bit of proof there to show you guys what is possible when you're following this system. So what I want to cover first is the pyramid of getting jacked naturally. Okay. And so this is part one of this series. Today I'm actually going to cover the training principles. And this is where everybody starts. They think, hey, I'll just get a training program, and then from there I'll be able to, get as jacked as I see the people on the internet. But in reality, you have a pyramid, and when you layer this stuff, you stack it up, your results compound and compound over time. And this is probably the way that I've seen it. Number one is your mindset. So how to approach training, how to make it the identity of who you are, and actually set yourself up so that your mind is set on getting the right results, enjoying the process, and actually doing what you got to do to get a really amazing result, and understanding that you actually can. It's not that difficult. It's just 9 times out of 10, the mindset, the identity, and the belief system that you have is the thing that's stopping you from that. Next thing is nutrition. Okay, and so when I was a full-time CrossFitter, I was training 2, 3 hours a day, couple times a day, 6 days a week, absolutely flogging myself, and I still look quite fat. My I was always getting injured. My performance was down, and I just wasn't getting too far. And once I started to understand and unpack nutrition, it's been an absolute game changer. Like, we use a lot of blood work for our athletes. This is the one thing that they always say, look, I just feel so good. I feel like I can train harder. I feel like I recover faster. So nutrition is definitely that next part. Then the next piece after that is staying in one piece. Now, I've been able to train probably the last 5 years consistently without having a major injury that set me back or stopped me from training in the last 5 years. Before that, I was injured all the time. Okay, so I sort of hit my 30s. I was breaking down all the time, getting injured, sore backs, stuff like that. But the last 5 years, pretty much stayed in one piece, and that's probably one of the fundamental things most natural athletes really have to understand, because if you've got the right systems, the right setup, and you stay in one piece, you can train longer, more consistently, and eventually build up your capacity. And it's going to help you apply, good training principles, good training methods, and get wicked results later on down the track. And the cool thing about it now, like some of the systems and training principles you can pick up, if you're doing that stuff right, you can get almost non-natural results, as a natural athlete, if you're doing everything right. And it's sort of been something that I've dived into a lot. So get all of that right, you're going to get jacked as fuck. But today I'm going to cover just the training principles, as I see it. So let's have a look at a little bit about this. And I want to give you guys the principles that help to engineer elite. Okay. And so this is a zoomed out perspective. Then I'm just going to show you an idea of what this style of program looks like. And so, as a natural athlete, there's a few things you have to take into account. Number one, if you're not using steroids, okay, and here's something that may shock you, is that a lot of people on the internet, a lot of people that are super jacked, bodybuilders, stuff like that, they take steroids. Okay. And so if you're following something that they've given you, the reason why you probably are not getting the same results that they are is because they have assistance in terms of recovering, being able to push harder. They don't break down as much, and that's why they're getting a result that they have. But there are the downsides of that use over time as well. So, the reason why you want to change up and understand that your recovery and the way you manage your stress is going to be extremely important. Also, the way you lay the foundations and the time frames you lay the foundations is going to help you engineer elite over time. So let's start with the first principle, okay? And so there's a lot of debate on how to get jacked, okay? And so for me, the number one thing that I'll always do, especially if I get a new client, is the first place I actually go to is a whole body compound movement approach. Reason being, if you move with good technique and if you are able to get really, really efficient and build your nervous system on big compound lifts, your body is going to get very good at recruiting a lot of muscle. Over time, when you transfer that to something like a cable machine or something that's a bit more stable, you're going to have more firepower in you to be able to then recruit more muscle and get more out of those machines. And I've just found over time that, anyone that wants to get strong, grow a lot of muscle and look really, really good, the number one thing they're all missing is an underdeveloped nervous system. Okay. And you look at, in general, like now it seems to be trending more to people want to be strong, they want to be athletic, they still want to look good, they don't necessarily want to look like a bodybuilder. And compound lifts are going to be the thing that sets that up really, really well. So it also makes it quite easy to structure your program throughout the week, because all you need is one push for the lower body, one pull for the lower body, one push for the upper body, one pull for the upper body. Okay. 4 exercises, 4 movements, covering the whole entire body. And if your programming is on point, you won't leave anything behind and you'll be able to get a really, really good result from those 4 exercises. You're going to get this whole body systemic approach to the nervous system, and you're going to be able to get more powerful, stronger over time, which is going to set you up, especially in the early phases. If you get really, really good at your movement quality and your efficiency to be able to move with good technique and move a lot of weight, over time, when you go back to more isolated exercises, more unilateral exercises, you're probably going to get more out of it. So that's why I always set up with compounds. It's efficient. You're going to get more muscle recruited throughout. And you're just going to get a total body, strength and performance focus, which is very, very cool. So my favorite exercises for the compound lifts is generally a squat of some variation. And so everybody's got slightly different levers. So if you've got slightly longer legs, you might do an anterior loaded or a front loaded squat. If you've got slightly shorter legs, it doesn't generally matter too much in terms of what squat progression you use, as long as you're picking one that's going to fix the weakness in your squat overall. For our lower body pulls, you can do something like a deadlift. Some people prefer a sumo, some people prefer conventional, some people trap bar, and some people off blocks. Okay, and so some people just purely an RDL or a snatch grip high pull or an explosive pull. Some sort of hinging exercise with a lower body pulling movement is something that everybody needs in their program. There's many, many variations of that. If you select the right variation at the right start part of the program, you're going to build a very, very strong posterior chain, which once again is one, like when you're loading the posterior chain very heavy, it's one of the strongest stimuluses for overall full body strength and then overall full body muscle as well. Upper body pulls, pretty self-explanatory. I really like the pendulum rope. Beautiful exercise, especially if you're wanting to build something like the bench press. It also builds a deadlift because it builds postural strength. If you use something like a slow eccentric, it almost acts like a lower back exercise as well. And so with the pendulum row, I actually prefer them from the blocks. This is something I learned from one of my mentors who coaches one of the strongest people in the world. He will row from a block to save the lower back just a little bit, and then you get that upper back pump of doom. And so pendulum rows are absolutely brilliant. Supported chest seal rows, cable rows, all of that sort of stuff are absolutely huge. Dumbbell rows, basically any row is going to be brilliant. And then you have your pressing movements, your upper body presses. I really do like overhead shoulder presses. It does make your shoulders nice and healthy. Okay, so as we've seen with one of my clients there, Jesse, who done the handstand push-up world record, very strong overhead. Okay, and so his shoulders are in very good shape because it's got very good postural muscles, his strength for pushing overhead. He's got good mobility, and it creates good stability around the shoulder joints as well. And it's something that if you keep in your program versus just purely bench pressing, it is something that's going to give you a bit more longevity over time as well. Obviously, then you got your bench presses once again. So wider bench press is generally going to target more chest, depending on your levers. Narrow, generally more shoulders, more triceps. And in general, something in there is going to be a variation that you need to improve the bench press overall. And it's going to build up your overall long-term strength. You can obviously adjust it to slightly target different muscle groups as well. But having your different variations, your bench presses is really important. Now, so generally the way you'll structure a program is you'll take your 4 exercises, and you can do this. There's a million different ways to write a program. If you'd like them to do a different, like on different training day splits, just comment down splits below, and I'll make sure I do another day on this. But let's say you did have a lagging muscle group, you do your 4 compound exercises for your whole body. Then you might do 1 to 2, accessory exercises where, generally you use some sort of machine. Let's say you need to bring up the hamstrings, or you just want to keep your knee held high, so you might do a seated hamstring curl or a lying hamstring curl, something like that. And so 1 to 2 extra exercises or gap exercises. Quite often, if you're doing that whole body approach with full body lifts, with compound lifts, you'll go to machines, so you keep that stress level down. Okay, so big thing about this is, especially with natural lifters, is we want to reduce the total chronic fatigue and the total chronic stress from our training so that we can adapt and recover over time. Now, this is where frequency and volume comes in, and quite often the absolute number one mistake all natural lifters make is way too much volume. Okay, and so they'll see someone like, I don't know, they're your bodybuilders where they're just doing so many sets, so much volume over time, and they'll think, I'll do that. What that does is it increases cortisol, which increases your body's breakdown of tissue. It also increases the total stress on the body over time, decreases recovery. Over time, you're going to get desensitized to your adrenal system. So as cortisol rises, or as adrenaline rises, cortisol rises. And after a while, what you'll find is you'll get the symptoms of overtraining. You won't feel like training at all. You'll feel like you're not getting as much from your lifts. And what that actually is it's not necessarily overtraining. It's that your adrenal system is actually down regulating because you've been pumping it so hard. And so this is where people use a lot of stimulants like your pre-workouts, your caffeines, and then they go smash themselves with heaps of volume. You will get away for it for a little while. And sometimes we will program stuff like this, but do it over a long period of time. It's not ideal for a natural lifter because you're going to down-regulate the thing that is going to allow you to push your training harder, which is going to get you better results because you're going to get more mechanical tension, you're going to get more strength gains, you're going to get more nervous system adaptations, which is going to make you stronger and more jacked over time. And this is where I actually prefer a lower volume approach with a higher frequency. And so, in general, especially if you're doing a lot of compound lifts or a lot of explosive athletic type movements, the more you practice it, the better you get at it. Okay. And so one of my core principles with training is that you should be able to push your technique as hard as you possibly can. Now, one of the things, and this is why we get results quite quickly, or one way you can get results really, really fast, and say go from squatting 1 times body weight to 1.5, 2 times body weight in 3 to 6 months. It's just a higher frequency. Quite often, what we see is people are just not lifting well. Their body's not used to that movement pattern. They haven't had enough practice in that technique, so they actually don't get better at it. And so if you have a higher frequency, and you can change the variation slightly, one thing is, you can change the different contraction type, you can change the movement pattern slightly, or you can change the variation of the lift over the week and still get a really strong stimulus without overdoing it or creating an imbalance. So having a higher frequency where you train, the same movement patterns 3 to 4 days per week with a lower volume is going to allow you to get better at the exercise faster, which means you can push it harder, which means you can get more maximally effective reps, which means you can get more mechanical tension, which means you're going to get more muscle growth over time versus just smashing yourself with heaps of volume and not really getting anywhere. Okay, so one way we love to do this is using a multi-contraction training system. And so I learned this from the great and powerful Christian Thibodeau. He uses what's called an omni-contraction. So 1 day of the week, you're going to train an eccentric focus, which is the lowering phase, which is essentially the muscle under length. Okay, so the muscle is being contracted or under tension while it's lengthening and being stretched. As we know with hypertrophy, when a muscle is stretched or has tension on it when it's being stretched, that's probably the most powerful stimulus for muscle hypertrophy. Okay, the other cool thing about that too is when you're slow lowering, you're actually getting more improvements or faster improvements in motor learning. So control and learning of the motor. The movement pattern. So anytime you move fast, it will actually mask, or speed will actually mask breakdowns in form and technique, and you'll get away with a lot of things, and it will actually mask any weakness you have. As soon as you slow things down, you're going to find your weaknesses, you're going to find your technique gaps, you're also going to improve your body's ability or time to actually get better at that movement pattern so that it can actually get stronger a lot faster, or better, more efficient at that movement pattern faster, which means you can lift more and once again get better results. Then another day of the week, we use an isometric contraction. So finding your weak spots, and one thing with isometric contractions, if you're pushing as hard as you possibly can, you're actually getting a higher firing rate of your muscle. And we like to build athletic bodies, especially as a natural athlete. You want to be fast, you want to be agile, you want to be athletic, because long term, you're just going to be, a more robust human. You're going to, one of the first things that will go as a natural athlete over time is speed and power. So having that higher firing rate is very, very important. Also, there's way less muscle damage. So you actually get less fatigue from an isometric contraction exercise so that, you're not actually going to be fatigued as much as you were from the eccentric focus day. Then we run a concentric focus day, okay? And so this could be explosive movements. This is generally your general reps. This is what you'll see in 99% of people in the gym. And this is why 99% of people in the gym don't have the results that they potentially could, because they're missing out the eccentric and the isometric contractions, and they just focus purely on the concentric. So reason we do this though, obviously with the eccentrics, you're moving slightly slower. We still want you to teach you to move maximal loads with maximal speed at different parts of your training program. So having that concentric in there. Also too, on a fourth day, you can do something like a gap day, where it is isolation exercises. If you've gone 3 days per week with your big compound lifts, on the fourth day, you might just do concentric only exercise, where you're taking the smaller muscle groups or a more isolated muscle group closer to fatigue and failure. Okay. The other thing is you have to respect the goal. And this is something that I learned from when I was weightlifting. So I wanted to when I first started weightlifting, I was like, oh, I just want to compete. Okay. And I was like, why am I doing that? I don't want to compete. I want to win. Okay. And so what that did is it changed the way I approached my training. It took me from, hey, just showing up and doing okay, to like, actually, if I want to win, I have to have intent with my training. I actually have to have focus with my training. I have to take everything else into account so that my training can be very, very good. And so, if you actually want world class results, you have to put world class effort, you have to put world class intent, and you have to have world class respect on the goal. One of the big things is that, like, if you go and look at anyone elite, what are they doing? They're doing things at a very, very high level. Try to model what the best of the best are doing. Okay, so always respect the goal. If you want an elite result, don't expect it from half-ass efforts and doing the basics and doing some influencer program. Get decent programming and do things the right way. You'll have far better results than you could ever imagine, especially if you do things well. So that's the training principles. Now to have a quick look at what a sample program looks like. So this is a 4 day per week whole body sample program. So day one, generally with all my programs, I'm going to do some sort of warm up, and I sort of, I guess, coin this like a power primal workout. So for all of my workouts, I like to have a little bit of mobility in there. I also like a lot of a lot of high volume banded blood flow work. Now, you will get a tiny wee piece of hypertrophy from this because you are getting a lot of reps. Cool thing about it too, high volume band work is actually very, very good for improving the elasticity and resistance of the tendons and joints. So putting in a little bit of that, with your loaded stretching, you're actually improving the body's resiliency. You're going to get less injuries, and you're going to get thicker, stronger tendons. You're also going to set up any positions you need for your lifting later on. And generally throughout the week, I'll swap them up and go upper, lower, upper, lower. You can do full body. I've just found generally it takes too long. And like if your warm up lasts more than 10 minutes, you're fucking around, in my opinion. So once you've set that up, though, you're going to go loaded stretch, high volume band work, then into a plyometric exercise of some description. Reason I do that, I love to switch the nervous system on. The better your nervous system is firing, the more you're going to get out of each of your lifts, and the more potential returns you're going to get from it. Also, too, I like to microdose plyometrics throughout the training program, because if you constantly keep those things in there, you're not going to lose any speed. You're actually going to get faster, which, as I said, is one of those little mini things. You want to make sure when you're doing programs like this, or when you're training, you want to get as much as you possibly can from as little as you possibly can. So you got to make sure that you don't lose any of the qualities that you've worked hard to build. And this is why I like to microdose certain things. So loaded mobility, high volume band work keeps the joints nice and healthy, keeps everything in one piece. Plyometrics keeps you fast, turns on the nervous system, sets up the rest of the workout. Then generally what I'll do is we will have 3 to 5 sets, okay? And what I actually generally do, and this is depending on who this person is, if we're just using an RPE scale, so it's like 8 to 9 RPE, which means basically how hard the exercise is, okay, or how hard it feels. Generally, what I'll say is I want you to do at least 1 to 2 sets where that is a genuine 8 to 9 RPE, where you've really pushed that. Now, this takes time to be able to actually do that because, as I said before, you need to learn to be able to push your technique really, really hard so that you can actually get the most out of the exercise. Once you get efficient at this, though, you only need one solid good set, maybe two. If you're really, really trying to get everything out of it as a natural lifter, 3 sets going really, really hard, like very close to failure, is going to absolutely cook you. And you might get away with it for a couple of weeks, but then you'll find that you just fatigue. So 1 to 2 sets, 3 sets, 4 to 6 reps for 5 second eccentric on our day one. Push at least 1 to 2 of those sets as hard as you can. If you get 6 reps, generally you can add 2 to 5 kilos depending on the lift. If you get 6 reps again, probably do the same. If you get to the last set and you're like 10 kilos heavier, probably means that your first 2 sets weren't heavy enough. Okay, so you want that window to be as small as you possibly can. If you get 6 reps every week, let's say you do a genuine 9 and you get, let's say, 100 kilos. Okay, and you do get the first week, you get 2 sets of 6. Last set, you only get 5. And you're like, if I did one more rep, I'd fail. Next week, you do 100 and you try to get all sets of 6. Okay. And then the last set, you might do 102. So you're just always constantly progressively overloading. And what you'll find is if you do this and you're patient with it, what real progressive overload is that you can actually lift more using the same amount of effort. Okay, you're not going to death, you're not overreaching by like just really tapping into your nervous system restores. And what you'll find is that the difference between a natural and an assisted lifter is that assisted lifters can tap into more of that more often. With natural lifters, you can definitely tap into it and get more out. You can grind it out. You can push really, really hard. But what you'll probably find is that over time, you just hit a wall. You'll hit a wall, and then you will not come back unless you take some time off. So making sure that if you're continuously progressing by 2 to 5 kilos every single week, you're absolutely fucking crushing it. If you're intermediate to advanced lifter, you're lifting somewhere between 1.5 and 2.5 times your body weight on a squat, for example, you can expect somewhere between 2.5 and 0.25 and 1% of increase in strength per week. So over the course of a month, you might only increase by 1% increase in strength. And some people are like pushing this really hard. That's why they stall out. This is why programming for a natural lifter is different to assisted lifters. Back to this. So anyway, so we generally have 3 sets, 4 to 6 reps, 5-second eccentric on day one. So that's our eccentric focus day. And for our squat variation, we picked a hanging band front squat. Now, hanging band front squat, the bands with the kettlebells actually make it a limiter. So in the start of a program, I'll generally pick something that actually makes it harder to complete the movement pattern by reducing the load, but improving the movement quality. Okay, so that's just why I chose the front squat here. Tall kneeling press, same thing. It makes it harder. The stability demands, the core demands, the overhead demands of a tall kneeling press versus a standard standing press are much, much more difficult. You're going to lift less, but you're going to improve the stability. When you get back more stability later on, you're going to lift way more, and you're just going to be able to punch it and get much stronger, much, much faster. Forward band RDL, just a hinge variation, then a pendulum row from the blocks. And then I always finish with a little bit of core as well. Sometimes if I'm tired, I won't go into the core, but generally that core is going to help, especially if you have the resources available. So generally what I'll do is some form of isolated core exercise, whether it's rotation work, anti-extension work, anti-flexion work, some direct oblique work, and then loaded carries. Okay, so that's what it looks like. So day one, that's we got the eccentric focus day. Day two, you've got the sticking point phase. So you've got an isometric focus on this day. Same again, 3 sets, 4 to 6 reps with a 5-second pause at the sticking point. So once again, front squat, cool. You might pause just above parallel because that's generally at that point, that's where your quads are going to be doing most of the work. Okay, that's where you want them to be very, very strong. So that's where you'll pause right there. Hanging band press, you might pause just at the forehead, cool, and it's like shaking like shit, makes it very, very difficult. Okay, reverse band RDL, you'll pause at the bottom positions, going to get that lower back, just absolutely like working very, very hard, pulling in those lats. Or you can pause at the top so that your glutes are on very, very hard as well. Cell row, pause at the chest, wherever your sticking point is, a little bit of core, reverse hypers, some dead ball carry. Day three, this is a concentric or speed focused day. Okay, and so what I've done here, and this is a typical setup. Like there's a million different ways to set this up. I always individualize it for each client, but what we've got is loaded stretching, our power primer for our warm up. Then we've got 3 sets of 6 reps at 80% of Monday's top set. Now those exercises there are actually like the load limited, so they're going to be light anyway. So when you get to this, for example, 80% of Monday's hanging band front squat might feel like 60 to 70% on your front squat. That's fine. I want people to move the bar fast. Okay, so we're actually working more of our speed day rather than just another heavy day. Okay, and so good thing about this, it still keeps that quality and it's still getting a bit more, we're getting a bit more volume in on this, but we're not actually fatiguing the body with just heavy, heavy lifting every single day. Okay, so really cool way to walk around that frequency, but also what you'll see is I've gone through the easiest variation of these exercises. Okay, so front squat, there's no hanging bands, there's no pause. Cool, it's going to be a better thing. But because you've done the work on Monday to improve your motor control, you've hit the weak spot on the Wednesday, on the Friday, that front squat's going to feel fucking tasty. Okay, military press, once again, you've got more stability. Deadlift, obviously, you can load it up more. So, a deadlift compared to a forward band RDL, once again, it's going to feel like 60, 70%. You're going to move that really, really fast. Pendlay rows, same again, you'll move that quick. Day 4, I've just got what I call a hot start warm up. Okay, so do some sleds into a core exercise, sled pull into a farmer's walk. Do 3 to 4 rounds of that. Just get you nice and warm. I find that people enjoy this. They're like, oh, I've lifted heavy all week. I just want to get some sweat up or just feel good. And generally with that core, that movement stuff, you're actually going to feel pretty good. Then you might do, and so there's a couple options here. You could do a power variation of a hinge, or you might do some explosive med balls. You might do some sprinting, some jumping, anything you really like. For here, I've got either a power snatch or a power clean. You could also sub that for a power shrug or a high pull for anywhere between 5 for 2 to 4 reps, and superseding that with a slam or a plyometric push-up of some sort, some explosive upper body, full body type exercise, just for 5 sets. Shouldn't be heavy. It should just be snappy and fast, building that explosive power. Then we've got some gap exercises. 1 set, rest the pause to almost close to failure. So leg extensions, obviously it's the same. Working the quads. You do 1 set for 10 reps, cool, and then basically you're going to rest for 15 seconds, do as many reps as you possibly can. Machine chest press, hamstring curls, seated cable row, your choice then of either some glutes and shoulders or some arms, and take them all close to failure. Those exercises way less demanding on the nervous system, so you can push them a bit harder, but it's just a good, well-rounded program. So team, that is part 1 in this series. It's easier than you think on how to get jacked naturally. Our next series, so make sure you subscribe. We will be going into staying one piece, a lot of loaded mobility, a lot of little extra things in terms of recovery, some stuff that you can do, so make sure that you don't break down, so you ultimately get to the point where you're as jacked as these guys or me one time that I was half decently jacked. All right, guys, have a good one.